Hello and welcome to another one of our Flesh and Blood New Player Hero Guides series. This is the last one we're doing for a while, since Lexi is the last on the list until Everfest comes out and potentially new heroes, though we will be doing the crew ones as well. Anyway, this video is about Lexi Livewire, the Tales of Aria Ranger hero, Elemental Ranger. I'm Steelfur, and this intro video is really here for you new players who are trying to decide what hero to invest your time and energy into. If you're just finding this video randomly and are still very new to the game, I would really recommend you watch the overview video at the start of the playlist these videos are on. That does a brief sort of 2-minute dive into each of the heroes, whereas each of these 10-minute videos focuses more on one specific hero. So unless you're sure that you want to play Lexi, I would really go and recommend watching that video instead, and then of course coming back here if Lexi catches your fancy. This video also isn't really going to dive too much into the rules of Flesh and Blood, except where they are relevant to this hero. So if you're looking for that, I would recommend there are some other guides and things you can find online, how to play Flesh and Blood, etc, etc. Lexi is an elemental ranger. That means she can play ranger cards and elemental cards. She also has the ice and lightning essences, which means you can play ice and lightning cards in your deck. If a new talented ranger comes out that's like a shadow ranger, you won't be able to play shadow ranger cards, but you will be able to play any neutral ranger cards that come with that set. The other ranger cards are in Arcane Rising and Crucible of War, but most of Lexi's cards are in Tales of Aria. It's important really to understand that the ice and lightning divide in Lexi means that she can be played in two ways. One is a very aggressive lightning go wide strategy, where you'll see her ability, which we'll talk about in a second, will get her get go again a lot. And the other one is a very controlling ice-based strategy, because a lot of the ice cards do control, and having that ability to switch between the two lists is very powerful for her, for new players, because it gives you more deck building flexibility with your card set. Now, if we look at Lexi's ability, once per turn you turn a face down card in your arsenal face up. If it's a lightning card, you can next attack this turn gains go again. If it's an ice card, create a frostbite token and under target hero's control, and it itself has go again, so you can just use that and then do something else. That means that she is very arsenal focused. So every turn you're going to be putting a card into your arsenal, hoping it's an ice or lightning card so you can trigger that ability, and then giving your opponent a frostbite token, which increases the cost of the first ability they play on their turn by 1 and then gets destroyed, or getting your next attack go again, which obviously means that you can attack multiple times a turn. Ranger classes are quite interesting because they all focus around the bow, which lets them load arrows from their hand into their arsenal. And pretty much all of their attacks are arrows and can only be played from their arsenal. This has some definite drawbacks in terms of the fact that rangers can't actually attack with their weapon unless they have an arrow. So fatigue, i.e. running out of arrows, is a real concern and worry for the ranger class, and makes it quite difficult to go up against more defensive heroes like Oldhim and Bravo. But aside from that, the arrows are all quite effective and quite fun, because most of them do have on-hit effects that cause some sort of impact to your opponent. So they are quite impactful when they do hit, but obviously you need a strategy to make sure they do hit, which is either buffing them or, of course, attacking with more than 1 or 2 of them so that your opponent can't block all the damage. We do see, of course, that Arsenal Zone is quite important, which is why the Ranger Legendary from Tales of Aria actually gives you a second Arsenal slot, so that you can reveal one of these Lightning or Ice cards, not necessarily have to play it, and then load up an arrow in the new free slot that you have available in your arsenal due to revealing the card, and then come in with another attack. So even if you've got a card in your arsenal, New Horizon lets you still load an arrow and shoot it regardless of what the card is, which is very, very important to Lexi. Now, Lexi is an interesting hero because she didn't do very well initially, just because, you know, the arrows are a bit tricky to get right and the ratio is a bit tricky to get right. A lot of people were trying to get these fusion decks with both ice and lightning going in, working, before realizing that she just works better where you have one element over another one. But she does have 2 or 3 very competitive decks right now, which have done reasonably well. First, we'll look at the one from the ProQuest in Cincinnati, which came 8th in the top cut. This is called it's basically a Death Dealer combo focused lightning deck. And what I mean by that, and I'm just going to quickly explain the combo here. So Death Dealer says, once per turn action 1, if you have no card in your arsenal, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal. If you do, draw a card. Snapshot says, Lightning Fusion, if it was fused, you may activate the abilities of your bows you control additional time this turn as they do with an instant. Now, when you activate an instant with Go Again, you actually get an action point back, even though because the instant didn't take an action point to do. So even if you haven't got Go Again on the card, the attack, like Snapshot, for example, if you trigger Death Dealer after you attack with Snapshot, as an instant, the Go Again will resolve and give you an action point. That means that you can play Snapshot, fuse with Lightning, draw a card with Death Dealer, and get Go Again, and use Death Dealer that second time. So you can load with Death Dealer once, draw one card, then play Snapshot, load with Death Dealer again, loading another Snapshot, drawing another card, or if you don't have another Snapshot, just coming in with another ability, but you've already drawn 2 cards that turn, which is still pretty good, right? If you can get Go Again on the Snapshot, you can do something else. So, you have lots of different options there for these big, powerful turns where you're either getting Go Again and then doing Snapshot, or you're doing Snapshot and then going in to a second attack, all depending on how the deck comes together. And that's kind of the basic combo. And then you have lots of other different sort of lightning cards that either buff that attack or make it sort of hit for more damage if it hits and give you more flexibility and Go Again with this combo. But the combo is the core of the deck. The other style of decks are a more ice-based control deck, running basically a lot of arrows like Blizzard Bolt and Chilling Ice Vein that have controlling effects if you fuse them with an ice card and if they hit, and trying to play at least 2 of those a turn with that Voltaire weapon that can load arrows twice a turn into the arsenal and fire those off. And this deck really is sort of like, it's there to counteract the super aggressive decks that don't really like blocking, like the Lightning Briar list that's been very popular in the US and other countries recently, as of November 2021. And this deck really punishes those people because they don't want to block. But if you don't block, then you suddenly end up with all of these controlling effects. So either discarding a card unless you pay 1, or getting Frostbite tokens for next turn. And it's important that they also run Shock Charmers. And remember that all of these attacks, so whenever an attack deals damage, Shock Charmers gives you another instance of damage for 2 resources. So if they let one of these attacks hit, you might pitch another blue from your hand, and suddenly it's not 1 trigger of Chilling Ice Vein, it's 2 triggers. And if they come in with a second attack, it can be 3 triggers, because if that attack hits, this also applies. And you're starting to see how in this deck, the ice effects add up to create multiple controlling elements from turn to turn, and create ways to slow your opponent down and make them have less impactful turns while still pushing damage yourself. So if you're the sort of person that appeals to, you want to be controlling, but you want to be sort of an aggressive style of control, then Lexi may in fact be the hero for you. I will say there are some caveats. If you don't draw arrows on a turn, which can happen and has happened in very high-profile tournaments, it can feel a bit bad. Obviously, you run a lot of arrows, so that's not very likely to happen. But it can feel quite bad because you don't really have a lot of other options if you don't draw arrows. And the other thing, of course, to remember is that if your deck is based around aggressive-based control, so if you do miss a turn where you don't put any pressure onto your opponent or control them, you could actually see yourself losing tempo or being on the back foot because your opponent won't have the same limitations, because they will have a weapon they can attack with or an attack action they can send at you. So kind of like if you take your foot off the gas, your opponent can get back into the game in a very powerful way. So you really do need to make sure that you're kind of like playing in a way that optimizes the control elements, optimizes the forcing your opponent to block, and making sure you're really putting out a control threat every turn, so they are forced to take you seriously and obviously not have as big or as strong turns to respect that. And that's kind of where we settle on with Lexi. She's got a lot of really cool control elements in the ice deck. She's got a lot of Go Again and flashy things in the lightning deck. A lot of people are really drawn in by this elemental ranger that shoots lightning bolts and flies through the sky on the Aurora Borealis and all the other cool stuff she does. A lot of people are drawn into Lexi by the ice controlled elements, and that having that option to not just get steamrolled by aggressive decks and actually have an option to control them. A lot of people just really like the idea of buffing up a big arrow and then shooting it in, and the arrow having some sort of on-hit effect that controls people a bit more. Like, for example, you have Remorseless and you have Sleep Dart. This makes your opponent lose a card for every action the card they play next turn. This one blanks their hero ability. So you have lots of these little effects that your opponent can't really let hit And if you have a way to basically attack multiple times a turn, your opponent either has the choice of giving you their whole hand to block or letting one of these attacks hit and having those negative effects applied to the next turn. Now, the negative of that is that your opponent can decide whether the effect is worth the damage and kind of has the control in their hands. But the fact is, a lot of these effects are played because they are worth it and are disruptive to your opponent, which means they are quite impactful on the game. Anyway, as I've said, this is kind of a bit of an overview. If that's been something you enjoyed, do consider looking into Lexi a bit more. Again, she falls into the Tales of Aria hero situation which more so than the other Tales of Aria heroes, she primarily relies on cards from her own set, which means she's also quite attractive to new players. Outside of things like Remorseless, which is a Majestic from Crucible of War, which is tricky to get, and Three of a Kind, which is a Majestic from Arcane Rising, both of which are out of print, the other cards you'll see in this deck are primarily cards from her own set, including most of the legendaries, and Perch Grapplers is a Majestic. So really building a Lexi deck is as much as just opening a lot of tails and getting the right cards, which appeals to a lot of new players. So if you're interested in Lexi, I hope this video helped. If you did like it, if it's helped you decide to play Lexi, please do let me know. I really enjoy getting that feedback. Otherwise, do please like and subscribe to the video, because that's also another kind of feedback I like to get. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you listening to another one of my videos very soon.